Hello, and welcome to Consciousness at Play, where every episode leads you on a journey of self-discovery. Today, we're joined by a special guest of ours, my healer, Tim Rothschild, who is a non-dual Kabbalist healer. And today, we're going to be exploring the topic of uh, the healthy approach of raising a child with a healthy sense of self. And yeah, before we get into it, guys, I just want to ask that wherever you're listening to this, please go to Spotify or Apple Music and give us a rating. It really helps the show. And yeah, let's get into it. So, Tim, how are you? How are you feeling today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's good to be back on the show and talking to you guys. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, great to have you. I'm excited.
Likewise, yes. Tim and I have been working with each other for a very long time, so this is very near and dear to me. Pull up my notes real quick. So Tim, yeah, like just want to, take it slow. What's it been like, to experience having a daughter and being a parent and all the things that come along with that?
Well, as you asked that question, the first thing I thought about was the moment she was born, and when I first heard her crying. For the first time I heard her voice, and I knew my life was never going to be the same again. It was a thing that happened right in that moment. So when you know, and it's been like that ever since. I'm actually really attached to her. It's hard even to come here and do like a podcast when I know she's upstairs and with other people. It's like I just want to be with her all the time, and when it comes to raising a daughter, I take a philosophy of, life has this natural intelligence built within it, right? It kind of knows what it's doing. There's this force that moves us forward and takes our sense of self and expands it over time. But the point is, there's some natural intelligence that always knows what it's doing and is going somewhere, and obviously that needs to be matured, right? So I see my role as a father as being a sort of what we would call in the school a briatic guardian. And what I mean by that is by briatic, I mean I'm being with something just as it is. It's a state of consciousness where you're not placing judgments or preferences or anything like that in terms of making something different than what it is. You're just with it as it is. So if I can be with my baby as she is, but still be her guardian, it's kind of like, say, when a kid is learning to ride a bike on two wheels for the first time, right? The training wheels are off and you're running behind them with your hands on either side. You're not touching them, right? You're not guiding them. They're doing it on their own, but you're there just in case they fall down to lessen the blow, right? And so that's kind of how I look at it. I'm that briatic guardian for my daughter, and she's going. She's going to be who she is, right? I don't have so much of a say in who she is and what she's going to be doing, but I can be that safe place for her and that wise counsel when she's ready for it. So that's kind of how. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I approach it.
No, for sure. It to me, it seems like it's a fine line to walk, especially as a parent who, may have aspirations or expectations, for their child, and being able to, you know, I guess take care of that within yourself and not project that onto a child. It seems like it would be sort of a difficult, line to walk.
It is. It is absolutely, and you don't know how much damage you're doing with your own unconsciousness most of the time, right? I mean, I can't, even though I've been doing this work for a long time, I'm more aware than ever of my unconsciousness and the things that I do that are reactive or historical. The shit from my past that's influencing my current sort of impatience with something. For example, right? So some aspect of me says you should be doing this already, or why'd you do that? And you got to be awake to these things. And the whole thing is, it's like I'm going to be crazy regardless, but if I can be awake to my craziness, then I can give it a place, and I may not act it out in the same way towards my daughter. And so the hope is not to pass that on, to the daughter through those ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, and and then yeah, being awake to things definitely makes a difference. Definitely lessens the blow or the impact. Um, One thing I've been hearing about as far as raising children is mirroring and reflecting. I'm not sure if you're too familiar with that, but if you can give me a definition or what that looks like tangibly, like what would it look like to mirror a child's behavior or give them a reflection to have a relationship to, I guess, what they're experiencing?
Yeah, well, I think it has to do with there's the literal ways of mirroring where a baby laughs and you laugh with them, or babies goo goo gaga, little like babble, and you talk back to them, right? So it's like letting them know that they're okay as they are, and at the same time there is an interaction that's taking place, because baby doesn't know itself unless it gets mirrored. So meaning like the parent needs to be able to show up for the child in a way where the child can experience itself,
Hmm.
in a safe way, right? And so it's like, if you yell at a child one time and there's a mistake, that's actually the child will get over it. But if you do these things more and more often, it starts to have an effect, right? So the hope is that you're not acting that stuff out on a child, but instead you're able to be with them as they are and let them explore the world, because as they're exploring the world, they're also exploring themselves. So I would refer to a guy named Donald Winnicott. I think it was like in the early 1900s or mid 1900s. He revolutionized psychotherapy by talking about the mother-infant relationship. He didn't talk too much about the father, but these days people say it's mother or father in terms of the relationship to the child. But it's all about giving the baby the space to be itself and to grow in this innate intelligence that it has to be in the world, you know. And so for the most part, I'm trying to get out of my own way, you know. I'm trying to get out of my way, just let her do what she wants to do, and at the same time creating a healthy structure for her so that she can thrive, you know. But I think mirroring at bottom, it's just being with your child. Play. Child wants to play, you play. Let it experience. If you're constantly cutting it off or telling it what to do or organizing its life, it can be limiting for their experience.
Yeah. No, I understand. I understand. And yeah, it's still trying to get over. I guess this is something within myself of, seeing the things that, you witness in the world and wanting to protect your child or, yeah, just fight against it. It seems like it would be sort of difficult to not lead or sway your child in one direction or the other. So that Briatic approach is um yeah, something I have to work toward, let's say.
I think it's something we all have to work towards, to be honest, because it makes me think about how um, what we experience in our childhood when we have children. I assume we don't want to put our kids through the same thing if you went through anything traumatic or any challenges as a child. So, Tim, I'm wondering, if what you feel comfortable sharing, of course, what are some personal challenges or setbacks that kind of triggered your journey of healing and awakening to get to the point where you are now? Because it seems like you have a very nuanced and kind of awakened approach to raising a child.
Yeah, so okay, so we're shifting gears a little bit, right? Talking about my life now and my life's challenges that I've sort of, I would say, my life challenges, I've used them in terms of my own personal healing and awakening, because every time you meet a particular challenge, it's an opportunity for self-compassion. It's an opportunity to offer yourself kindness and to be curious about what's going on. Part of my personal philosophy is that the universe is healing. We're living in a self-actualizing cosmos, and everything that we say and do and think and whatever is an attempt to heal. Even the most screwed up attempts to heal that you can say, how could a school shooting or something like that be an attempt to heal? Well, in a really screwed up way, this person is calling out for help in a certain way
Hmm.
or acting out, so everything is actually is an attempt to heal. So I give everything a place, and everything has a right to exist because it's here. We just want to have an awake relationship to it, right? So the challenges that I've had, to be honest, in my personal life, most of it has to do with addiction, actually, which is, it's been, it's actually only been until recently. It was like, because of all the spiritual work I do, I could always be about 99% committed to staying sober and these kinds of things, but I've never been 100% committed. And it was only recently that I 100% committed to it, and it's actually been pretty amazing. Because
Mm.
what I didn't realize was there was some aspect of my consciousness that was always saying, you know what you need to do to be in alignment with yourself. And you know deep down that you're the kind of person that needs to go through life sober. And anytime that I wasn't doing that, it would affect my chi. It would affect my life force. And I was sort of in denial of that, because I could still, with my charisma and my intelligence, I could still get through the day, but it became about potential. What's my real potential going to look like? If I continue these kinds of behaviors in 5 years and 10 years, what's my life going to look like? And if I change it, what's my life going to look like then? So that's the kind of work that I've been doing lately. But other than that, taming my monkey mind has been something that's been a real issue, because I did have kind of a screwed up childhood, and so I have a very reactive personality. I'm quick to anger, actually. I'm a very passionate person, but I'm also that rolls over into, like, I grew up fighting a lot. So oftentimes it takes my 9-year-old stepdaughter to say, "Hey, Tim, take 10 seconds." And I go, "Oh, thank you so much, Evelina." I was raising my voice. I didn't realize that, because I'm so used to doing this kind of stuff, right? When I grew up in my house, it was like everybody was yelling all the time, and it was like fighting for everything, So now it's like I'm in a situation where I'm in a happy home, and it gets to reveal all of your imperfections, So I use my day to day as a way to become more mindful and a way to become more self-compassionate, because what I offer to myself, I can then offer to other people. And if I'm holding myself accountable, that gives me the ability to stand strong in the face of whatever life throws at me, because then I can say, "Hey, no, this is not okay." And I can set proper, healthy boundaries because I'm in alignment with myself. That makes sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. And I feel like a lot of those challenges is what sparks everything for us. But I do have a question on the addiction front, because I am personally, my soul's been calling for me to be 100% sober as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some things that have kind of been personal motivators, or something that gets you going to say, "Hey, I'm going to do this now, I'm going to move forward," or get that 1% and turn it to 100%?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's about commitment. Right? You have to really, you sit down and you say to yourself, "I'm not going to be 99% committed anymore," because every time I'm 99% committed, I'm going to have whatever your choice is, whether it's sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, pot, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to have that wrestling match in your head of, should I or shouldn't I? Should I or shouldn't I? If you go 100%, that voice comes in and you go, "No, I'm 100%. I'm not going to even entertain this at that point." But then you also need a game plan, right? Because addiction's a real monster. And oftentimes our own small personal will isn't what can get us through it. And I think time and time again, if we are actually addicted, that proves it, right? No matter how often that little voice rationalizes or justifies using, and then you fall back into it, and then you start, and then the shame spiral starts again. You feel like
Mm-hmm.
shit about yourself, and then you use again. Right. So it's this process of, first of all, it's like a multi-pronged approach, which is what I'm realizing. It's like you got to deal with your shame. And so the recipe for dealing with shame is sharing it with somebody else, somebody you trust and who loves you and who can support you, so that you can talk about your challenges, right? And then you got to do stuff that works, meaning visualization, right? Visualize what your life will look like in 30 days, right? Because it takes 30 days to rewire your brain from an addiction to start that process. And then visualize what it's going to look like in 6 months or a year. Go out 5 years and 10 years, and let yourself really feel it, because feeling it is actually key. And really what we're working with here is manifestation at that point, right? So you start to connect all of your emotions and feelings to whatever this bad habit is, whatever this addiction is, to, really think about how it's damaging your life and feel that. And then really think about what thriving in sobriety could be like, and feel that. And then what starts to happen in my own personal experience is, when I have these urges, I start to feel like, for me, say drinking is an example. I have an urge to drink. Like, I was at a festival yesterday. My favorite thing to do is to get fucked up at a festival and have a great time, right? So yesterday was tough for me, but all I had to do was remember the feeling of being hungover. And then I only had to remember all of the times that I wasn't able to face what was going on in my life, and I didn't want to face it, and I chose to drink instead. And I started to feel that shame, and I went, I don't want to do that. And then I connected to, all right, what's my life going to look like when I'm sober? And I was like, I'm thriving again. So you just have to have these things in place. I also have a game plan, right? I can't do this at a festival, but my game plan is, anytime I have an urge, I'm going to drop down and do some push-ups, or I'm going to do some sit-ups, or I'm going to
Okay.
do some pull-ups, because I love training, right? So there's, like, again, it's a multi-pronged approach. Yeah. That's just a
I like
few. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I like that though. I didn't want to interject, but it makes me wonder because we are talking about children and dealing with loved ones. Essentially, if you open up that umbrella a little bit, when dealing with other people that you know are have bad habits, or when your child grows up and maybe they like to steal a cookie every once in a while or too many, what's your perspective in giving them empathy or just kind of guiding them or providing them with support? Because sometimes we can't change people around us, but we want to support them the best we can.
Yeah, I would say again, meeting it with compassion, which means giving it a place, right? So I catch my daughter stealing a cookie. I'm not going to come right, my own personal philosophy. I'm not going to come down on her and say that's wrong. This is what you shouldn't do, and let just kind of yell at her, that kind of thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions. Why did you do that? Why did you feel like you had to sneak it instead of asking? Is there something about our relationship that makes you feel uncomfortable? Or maybe they're exploring stealing for the first time, right? Everybody's stolen, whether it's a big thing or a small thing. At some point that urge is going to show up. So I want to mature and educate these desires. I want to educate it, and so that they can understand where it's coming from, how it works, and that it's okay, and at the same time it's not okay, right? We don't steal, right? It's not the right thing to do. There are other ways to go about it. Stealing might seem like the easiest way, but the easiest way isn't always the best way. That's kind of how I would approach it.
Yeah, and I like that because I feel like a lot of the parents I've seen, even in my adulthood or growing up, we were for certain things that we would do, our parents came down on us hard.
Mm.
And we learned to kind of whatever the urge was that made us do that action, or we kind of put that away and kind of tucked it in the corner. And then when you become an adult, kind of creeps up, it starts to come out in different interpersonal relationships. And um, it's nice that you're giving your daughter that gift of understanding those urges or reasoning behind why they're doing certain things instead of just doing it unconsciously.
Yeah, because man, there's so much that can go wrong as you're raising a child, or even in just relationships with people. But in terms of raising a child, you don't want to thwart their desires, right? You
Mm,
don't want them to feel like at a base level that they can't have certain desires. Some are okay, some are not. And it's more about, again, educating it and maturing it so they understand which I said, so they're all okay, but the fact is you want to know where it's coming from, right? Because that's really what matters. It's where's something coming from. The behavior is changeable, right? You can correct behavior, but you don't want to make the child feel like they're wrong because they've done something that's not proper at that moment.
yeah. And
Because then you just want to finish, because then they go through life kind of rolling along because they can't include their own desires, right? So they're not really in the world at that point. So that's, yeah, it can make a big difference in a kid's life.
Yeah, because as I've grown older and become an adult, it's been about integrating the things that really made me happy as a kid, whether they were part of my shadow per se, or they're part of like what I like to showcase in the world. Because at a certain point, you have to be able to integrate those things within your life, in my opinion, or from my perspective today, at least. So I have
Yeah.
to agree with that a lot.
While we're actually on that topic, there was something I wanted to share. I was listening to the book, Tim, that you recommended to me a while ago, Soul Without Shame. And this
Hmm.
part stood out to me. It said, part of growing up is learning to control your self-expression, not saying everything that comes into your mind and not always expressing your feelings, such as a dislike, a revulsion, fear, or desire, because it's not appropriate in many situations. For a child, this is difficult to grasp. Often learning to suppress the expression of a feeling or thought leads to suppressing the feeling or thought itself.
Hmm.
So for example, a child may think if I shouldn't express my anger, that must mean anger is bad. And if I
Hmm.
can't express it, then what's the point of feeling it? What comes to your mind, Tim, when you hear this kind of scenario?
Yeah, well, it speaks to, right, first of all, you have to meet the development of the child, right? What can the child's intelligence take in at this particular moment, right? So you don't want to give the wrong what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to steer them. You don't want to give them the wrong idea of what's allowed and what's not allowed. Yeah, again, you want to mature it, right? So everything, again, compassion and action means everything has a place. You just want it to be in relationship to what's actually going on in your environment, right? So as you're older, we know, there's a time and place for sharing your personal stuff, or for getting in the way and telling somebody, no, don't do that, right? There's just, you have to tolerate things differently and act differently. As a child, it's, child's kind of have a free, they can say what they want for the most part, right? And they're just expressing themselves. We can't take it personally, right? So I think as long as a child feels like they can be as they are, over time they'll figure out the rest. They'll know, it just, with the, they'll screw up from time to time, but they'll feel like they can repair the relationships and they can grow. And that's ultimately what you want, because we're not going to be perfect. So you want to give them that foundation that says you won't be perfect, but you can learn from it, and you can evolve from it, and you can become a better person from it.
Do you feel like that's the underlying message that you are sort of conveying with the Briatic approach, like in terms of their judgment, like their internal voice, their super ego? Do you feel like that's the undertone, that like, I can, I'm not a terrible person if I do this. I can learn from this. There's always something to, you see what I'm saying?
I think so, because the Briatic approach, again, it's about letting things just be simply as they are. So the road to Bria, if you're going to be a consciousness explorer and being on a healing journey, basically means working through all of your historical stuff so that you're not bringing memory into the present moment. You're not bringing your history into the present moment, which allows you to relate to it as it is. So bring me back to your question.
Yeah, just the development of the superego, the internal parent, that you hear throughout your lifetime as an adult. Mine's is very overcritical, and so I'm learning to dial it back a bit and
Yeah.
learning to talk to myself in more gentle ways. So I'm just wondering, as you're raising a child and how you disciplined or raise your child, a lot of it goes into how they parent themselves as they get older.
Yeah, and that's again why you want to set the stage for um, uh, allowing things to be as they are, so that they can have their own relationship to it while getting the guidance, right? So you don't want them to hurt themselves, and you don't want them to act poorly in certain situations. So you meet it as it is, and they'll grow, they'll learn, you know. And look, it's inevitable, right? There's going to be times when she's just not going to understand. You can't have that toy today, and she's going to feel like her sense of self isn't big enough to tolerate that. So she's going to hate me, she's going to hate the world, she's going to hate everything, for that time being. And that might lead to some inner voice down the road that she might have to deal with when she grows up in therapy, right? I mean, the only reason why you have a critical part of yourself is because somebody was critical in your life. So you internalize it, and that critic it has a job, right? If you did the healing work with it, you could sit down and ask it, okay, this part of myself, how old do you think I am right now? And it might say like 3 years old, 5 years old. You might say, so what are you afraid of? What are you afraid might happen if you stop doing your job? And that part of yourself might say, you're going to die, or you can't take care of yourself, or you're going to get in really bad trouble, And then as an adult, you need to relate to that in a new way, and sort of just restructure your relationship to this helper, right? This aspect of your consciousness has been helping all your life, but it's out of relationship with who you are now, and you want to be free of it in a certain sense. So I don't think you can ever really, no one's going to have perfect parents, so they're always going to have to do that kind of work. You just want to lessen the blow as much as possible.
Yeah, there's so many different variables when being a parent, because what may work today wouldn't work 20 years ago or 50 years ago or in the future 30 years, just because of the environment landscape. You can be perfect, but it's also time period, in my opinion. But moving forward in your kind of journey as a parent, how do you view yourself or envision yourself incorporating different spiritual or mindfulness practices into your parenting style? So
Mhm.
any rituals or activities that kind of come to mind in terms of nurturing your child's spiritual well-being?
Well, she's going to be raised by a bunch of spiritual beings. So I think a lot of it is going to be from osmosis, like she's just going to be in this environment. So, things like meditation or self-awareness and yoga, these kinds of things are going to come naturally. Kirtan, chanting to God and these kinds of things. We like to do this stuff in the house. So she's just going to be a part of that, and as she grows up, we'll meet it. We'll see what she's interested in and things like that. But, of course, she's going to be raised in a house that really encourages self-awareness and knowing yourself and being as sane as possible, right? Because if you don't know yourself, things can just get very crazy. And
Yeah,
you're not living a conscious life. So it's all about consciousness.
for sure. And I think in our world today, because eventually I do want kids. Right now, I'm childless, right? But I do have lots of nieces. And I think one thing that I've experienced just being an uncle is being present is a form of mindfulness sometimes. If you can sit down and draw with a child, or if you can sit down and do one activity with them, I think it fosters that ability to be present. Because if you look around nowadays, I think, without too much judgment, a lot of us are doing multiple things at once. We're watching TV, we're having a conversation, we're eating our food, we're on our phones. It's like a big mix of things. So
Mhm.
I do like the osmosis thing, because your child's going to see parents who are doing one thing at a time.
Yeah,
Maybe they're
hopefully,
doing
right?
yoga, or they're meditating. They're doing one thing. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah. And when she's ready, we'll introduce her to the practices, But for
Hmm.
now, it's like it's in the air she breathes, so it's going to be a part of her. That's the hope.
Yeah, yeah. Because the chaos, you take that in by osmosis as well.
Sure.
Hopefully you can transmute it, but that's a real thing as well.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like I don't know, Tim, if you plan on putting her in traditional schooling, but I'm just thinking about the effects of that and the disconnect that happens between like your body and, your brain. And so I feel like, what you're talking about as far as meditation, yoga, these are things that incorporate her being more in tune with her body and feeling a sense of connection. Um, yeah, so I'm just curious. Yeah, like, do you have a idea of how you plan to, put her through school or
You know,
things to
I
mitigate?
I just bought a house, the house that I'm raising my family in about a year ago, and it's in the same school district that I grew up in, actually. And I love the school district. I think it's really good. It's a public school system, but it did a great job for me. And so I have no problem sending her to a regular school. Now, do I imagine in my daydreaming moments, a world where school isn't the way it is, and we teach, I don't know, maybe we teach people how to handle money, or maybe we teach people how to become more mindful and do yoga. I go to some schools and teach meditation and yoga, which is cool, but it's like, oh, not all schools are doing that, and this is pretty brand new.
Mhm.
So it's like, of course, I would revolutionize the whole school system, right? But the main thing is, it's such a part of our community. The choice that I'm making is, it's like, all right, I'm going to let my daughter go through this school. I know it has its limitations, and I know it's very damaging in other ways. So I'm going to lessen that impact at home by explaining that truth. When she's old enough, I'll tell her exactly what the deal is and why she's going to school, why she has to go to school. And then, let her know that down the road, she can totally make her own choices and things like that. But for now, this is such a part of life. I don't want her to miss out. I don't want her to be an outsider. I don't want her to experience that. When she's older, she can choose to be an outsider. Like, for the most part, I feel like an outsider right now with all the work that I do, but that's okay. I can handle the loneliness, and I realize it's a path that not everybody's going to take, right? So I don't know if my daughter's going to take that path as well, but I want her to have that option when it's there. And in the meantime, I want her to be in the world, meeting people, socializing. I want her to have that experience.
That's real. My neighbor, who's like family to me, I love them deeply to this day, still in communication all the time. Um, he chose he had it was either he sent his kids off to a preparatory school or boarding school, but he decided to send them to public school for a simple reason that you're saying, is to expose them to lots of different types of people, and just to be able to kind of be one of to survive in our society the way it's set up today, without coddling or putting them in a position where they wouldn't know how to react in a normal situation. I think that was his mindset behind it. So I think there is kind of some benefits to that in general, because I think people make that decision for multiple reasons. Maybe it's like you're saying, or maybe it's because they don't want their kids just to be around a bunch of, you know, yeah, people that are overly prepped.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. You know what? If you live in a bubble, it's a problem, right?
yeah,
You need to get bacteria in your hands, as a metaphor, right? Then baby puts its hand in its mouth, and its immune system gets stronger as long as baby doesn't die, which is something you always have to worry about. But you need to be out there and having that friction with life. That's how you grow and evolve, right?
I had an experience. I was on Instagram and I saw somebody I follow, and they were letting their kid just kind of touch a tree. They're near a road, but they trusted the kid that the kid wasn't going to run out. But it was just like weird for me to see a parent. I think they were from Sweden, so but they were in America, but they had a different mindset of like. I feel like nowadays we just want to put our kids in bubbles. It feels like almost. Because I didn't grow up in a bubble, I'd say, because my parents let me roam free a little bit. But I feel like a lot of young kids are put into a bubble, and I think it does harm them because I think some of my peers, they were put in bubbles, and now if you kind of check in on them, those bubbles kind of did hinder their growth because, like you're saying, you need to become resilient by touching the bacteria in the world. You can't just hang out in a bubble. It's not healthy. It's not safe.
Yeah.
Uh,
You got to
yeah.
find that, you got to find that healthy balance, right? And it's not, again, it's not going to be perfect. She's going to have problems, but that's also an opportunity to teach her how to meet problems and how to grow from them as well. Because some households, they don't want to have problems, and so like they're always in like this problem solving consciousness, and they never let something just be as it is, and like there's always this doing, So it's just about finding that balance.
Yeah. So, I do have
Kind
a
of.
question for you, but go ahead, Jihad.
Well, no, I'll let you go.
So it's about personal growth and healing. So, in your opinion, how can an individual seeking personal growth and healing embrace their authentic selves? And is there such a thing as being too focused or too focused on self-improvement? Because it seems like being overly focused on that hinders your experience of life. And for with all the different hats that we have to wear as parents, as people in a relationship, as a friend, as an employee,
Mhm.
um, how do you find that balance to spend time healing and on your personal growth, but also being in the real world as well?
It's a great question. What I love about spiritual work in general is that it includes everything, right? That seems to be the theme for today. I keep saying that, but it's the truth. So when I do my spiritual practices, really what I'm doing is I'm priming myself to heal and awaken as I go through the static and friction of life. Right. So I
Mhm.
sit down and I do 10, 20-minute mindfulness practice. Then I go sit down with my daughter and I get to observe all the times that I check out and all the times that I'm not being present with her because I primed myself for that. Or maybe I do a meditation that Jihad probably learned in the school called Panimi Makif. And what that does is it helps you recognize when you're inward and when you're outward. And so, if I'm sitting down with a client in a healing session, am I like totally in their world or am I totally in my world or am I finding a balance between the two? It all comes down to consciousness and mindfulness, because that's ultimately what sort of directs, what you're doing, So I think it comes down to that. Yeah.
I love that answer because it makes you think you're priming yourself for to show up for everybody or to show up for
Yeah.
yourself even. So
Yeah.
I think that's what kind of this whole spirituality and kind of just bringing consciousness to what you're doing is doing. You're preparing yourself to be your best self with and whatever that means for you.
Yeah,
So it's
and
cool.
and you can meditate 24 hours a day, right? Any time that you remember that you can meditate, you can do that. Just concentrate on something or notice your breath or fall in love with your baby. That's what I do. Like I'm just like I it's a natural thing. So I just let myself be with her. And I'm like, the best things in life really are free. Like this is a wonderful experience, you know? And it's a big part of my mindfulness practice that lets me do that because otherwise if I had this baby 10 years ago, I might be concerned with like so many other things that are causing anxiety or this or that. And my monkey mind wasn't under control. And I wouldn't be the father that I am. So yeah, you got to put the work in. Yeah. And it primes you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like you since Jihad and I we haven't had kids yet, we're still growing. It sounds like you're not too mad at us for not jumping over that line and trying to have kids just yet.
No, man, do you? I think, there's no good time to have a kid, I don't think. So when it
Fair.
happens. But for now, if you've got the opportunity to, I'd say take advantage of your freedom. Don't take it lightly. Explore what you can explore, have a good time, and when you're ready, you'll have a kid.
I like it. I like it.
I think it's important for people to recognize it's actually it's radical for most people that haven't been introduced to this concept in non-duality of including everything and giving everything a place, right? Because so many of us have these sleeping judgments, these lightning quick filters that say this is allowed to exist and this is not allowed to exist, right? And if we're not conscious of those things, it completely influences the world that we live in. And, you know, talking about a daughter or son, right? That daughter or son is going to get that message. This is allowed, this is not allowed. So this aspect of myself, I need to tuck away. This aspect of myself is good, you know? And then you start to learn, like the kids start to learn, oh, okay, so if I show this side of myself, I get love. If I show this side of myself, I might die, because that's really what it comes down to for the kid. And so what that looks like for the rest of their life, maybe they come to me when they're 30 years old, 40 or 50, and they say, I'm living a joyless life. You know, I work, I make money, I have a family, I have everything on paper, but I'm just so unhappy. You know, and we explore it. Maybe they do their psychological work with the therapist, we do the spiritual work with me, and they discover that, yeah, certain things weren't allowed when they were younger, and that their parent, you know, sent them that message. So they tucked this aspect of themselves away, and then they tucked it away for so long that they forgot about it entirely. So now they have to go on this whole healing and awakening journey to rediscover themselves and meet each one of those barriers, just like that critical voice that you're saying, right? There's going to be a whole committee of voices and aspects of their consciousness that are blocking them out of self-protection. So it's a way of healing spiritual relaxation, so that you can relax more into yourself and realize that it's not dangerous to be you anymore. In the same way, at least, right? Danger exists, but it's not in the way that you were relating to it, where it's like this big thing that's going to happen if you are yourself. And that's a wonderful place for somebody to be, because they get to explore the world through a whole new lens, and they get to go on a healing journey and journal about themselves and figure out what they like and what they don't like. It's like they're living for the first time. And it's that kind of stuff. That's why I do what I do. You know, I love helping people reconnect to themselves, rediscover who they are, and be who they are. Because when something is what it is, or a person is who they are, it's like this shining, beautiful thing. It's like, oh, you ever been around somebody who's so free? You know what I'm talking? Like somebody who's genuinely happy, you
Yeah, you
know,
can
and
feel it.
you're like, what the hell? How did you get like this? You know, it's just, it's so, but it changes you, right? So it's almost like, to me, we need to take responsibility. If you know about this, right? If you took the red pill, if you know it's possible, right? You have